Welcome, everybody, to Ready, Set, Teach, session 2 about expectations, routines, and behaviors. My name is Nicole Dissinger. I've been in education for about 18 years and currently work as a mentor, instructional coach, and professional learning facilitator. I have taught in a variety of settings around the world, including Arizona, Ukraine, Singapore, and Hawaii. I earned my bachelor's degree in elementary education with an emphasis in psychology, and my master's degree in early childhood education with a bilingual multicultural endorsement from Northern Arizona University. I currently mentor first year teachers through the AZ K-12 Center and provide coaching and professional learning for Plan Z and the International Baccalaureate. My work focuses on supporting teachers through coaching, facilitating professional learning, and designing student-centered instructional practices.
I'm Tammy Musiowsky, founder of Plan Z Education Services. I began my teaching career in Edmonton, Canada, and later taught in New York City, where I worked in elementary classrooms and served as a pre-K coordinator. I also taught internationally in Singapore before transitioning into coaching and professional learning. I served as a director of teaching and learning in Hawaii and developed coaching models, including early virtual coaching practices. Currently, I work in partnership with the AZ K-12 Center to mentor teachers in Arizona. Through Plan Z, I provide coaching and professional learning for teachers and school leaders, supporting instructional practices and classroom culture development. Before we get started, we want you to know that that as a participant of these learning sessions, at our in-person day in September, you will receive a card deck of tips and examples that we will be sharing with you throughout the series. By the end of this series, you will be able to establish clear classroom routines and structures that support smooth transitions, maximize instructional time, and reduce daily decision fatigue. Apply core teaching values to everyday decisions, ensuring that planning, management, and instruction remain focused on student learning, relationships, and equity. Create a positive, consistent classroom culture where expectations are clear, students feel a sense of belonging, and learning behaviors are explicitly taught and reinforced. And prioritize high-impact practices over perfection, using a simplified approach to planning and classroom management that supports sustainability, confidence, and long-term growth. Now we'll step into session 2, set expectations, routines, and behaviors.
So in our first session, Ready, we focused on the foundation of classroom culture, your values, and the skills students need to thrive in your classroom. We talked about how your values shape the learning environment you want to create and how teaching students the skills they need, like self-management, communication, collaboration, these help them navigate and succeed in that environment. So today we're moving into the next phase of building that classroom culture. So this session is called Set, because once you're clear about your values and the skills you want students to practice, the next step is creating the structures that make those things possible. And those structures come in the form of expectations, routines, and responses to behavior.
Think about it this way. Values tell us what matters. Skills are shown through students' actions and behaviors. Expectations and routines tell students what everyday life in the classroom looks like. Without those structures, even the best intentions can start to feel confusing for students. When expectations are unclear, students have to guess what we want. When routines are inconsistent, students don't know what will happen next. And when behavior responses change from day to day, students don't know what to expect. So our goal today is to make those pieces clear, teachable, and consistent.
Let's start with expectations. Most teachers walk into the classroom with a general idea of what they want from students. So maybe things like be respectful, be responsible, work hard, be kind. Those are all important ideas, but students find those a little abstract. because what respectful looks like in a classroom isn't always obvious. What responsible means during independent work might look very different from what it means during group work. So, part of our job as teachers is to make those expectations visible and concrete. We want students to understand not just the words, but the actions that go with them.
This is where it can be really helpful to connect your expectations back to the values you identified in session one. For example, if you value respect, what does respect actually look like in your classroom? Does it mean listening when someone else is speaking? Does it mean using a calm tone during disagreements? Does it mean taking care of shared materials? All of those behaviors are ways students might demonstrate respect. But students need us to spell those things out clearly because when expectations are clear, students are much more likely to meet them.
Another important idea here is that expectations work best when they're clearly connected to what students are actually doing in the classroom. So, most effective classrooms have somewhere between, let's say, 3 and 5 core expectations. That keeps them memorable for students and manageable for teachers. For example, you might have expectations like be respectful, be responsible, be engaged in learning. But expectations aren't just broad ideas or values, they're tied directly to how students are expected to act in specific moments throughout the day. So once you've named your expectations, the next step is helping students understand what those expectations look like in action. Because being responsible during a class discussion is probably going to look different from being responsible during independent work or even group activities. That's where our routines come in. And routines take those expectations and make them concrete by showing students exactly what to do in different situations. So they're not guessing, they're practicing. You could even create a mini anchor chart for the routine of what responsibility looks like and sounds like in each scenario. You can invite students to tell you examples as you chart and then practice the routine together so they can see and rehearse the expectation in action. So let's walk through an example together. Imagine you're in a third grade classroom or fourth grade. And in session one, you might have identified values like respect, responsibility, and curiosity. Now, think about what that might look like as classroom expectations. A teacher could decide on 3 core expectations, kind of like we talked about earlier: be respectful, be responsible, be engaged in learning. So notice how each expectation connects back to the values. Be respectful connects to your value of respect. Be responsible connects to both responsibility and ownership of learning. And be engaged in learning reflects curiosity. Next, we want to think about what these expectations look like in action. For example, be responsible might mean bringing materials to class on time, staying on task during independent work, asking for help when you need it. And being engaged could even look like participating in class discussions, asking questions when something isn't clear, or trying a new strategy, even if it's challenging. Even if you haven't taught a lesson yet, walking through this kind of scenario helps you see how expectations can be connected to your values and made concrete for students. It's also important to note that each of these actions will need to be taught and practiced, but we'll get into that in the next section.
So now take a moment to think about your own classroom. What 2 or 3 expectations would you want every student to understand clearly? How do they connect to the values you had identified in session one? You might want to pause here and jot down a few ideas in your working document. Even imagining this scenario is a helpful first step. Once expectations are clear, the next piece of the puzzle is routines. Routines are the predictable patterns that organize everyday classroom life. They answer questions like, what happens when students enter the classroom? What does independent work time look like? How do students transition between activities? How do they ask for help? What happens when class ends? For experienced teachers, many of these routines feel automatic. But for students, especially at the beginning of the year, they're completely new. And without clear routines, students have to make guesses about what to do.
When students are guessing, two things often happen. First, the classroom can start to feel a little chaotic. And second, teachers can start to feel frustrated because students aren't doing what we expect them to do. But many times the issue isn't defiance, it's actually uncertainty. Students simply aren't sure what the procedure is. That's why strong routines are so powerful. They remove that guesswork, they create predictability and structure, which helps students feel more comfortable and confident in the classroom.
Another way to think about routines is that they protect our instructional time. If students know exactly how to enter the room, start their work, transition between activities, and ask for help, you spend far less time managing logistics and far more time focused on learning. Routines help students develop independence, which gives them opportunities to practice agency. Instead of constantly asking the teacher what to do next, they begin to understand the flow of the classroom and take responsibility for their role in it.
One of the biggest mistakes we can make as teachers is assuming that routines will just develop naturally. But effective routines are actually taught the same way we teach academic content. We introduce the routine, we model what it looks like, we give students a chance to practice it. That's right, practice. Just like students need multiple opportunities to learn a new academic concept, they also need the same opportunities to learn a new routine in order to meet our expectations. Practice and feedback until it becomes comfortable and consistent. Over time, these routines become part of the classroom culture. Students begin to know exactly what to do, and the classroom starts running much more smoothly.
Let's look at a routine focus, transitioning smoothly from one activity to the next. Why this routine matters. It minimizes wasted time between lessons. It keeps students focused and reduces off-task behavior, and it helps you maintain control and momentum in the classroom. Here's a step-by-step plan for teaching this routine. You decide on a signal, so you can use a clear cue like a chime, a hand signal, or a countdown. Then you're going to model the routine. Show students how to stop what they're doing calmly when they hear the signal. Demonstrate gathering materials, putting away one set, then another, and then explain the expected behavior, moving quietly, taking only what's needed, returning to their seat or group promptly. Then you practice together. Have students do a mock transition while you walk around and give feedback. Correct gently if someone forgets a step, like leaving materials on the table or is talking too loudly. And then you'll want to reinforce that. Remind students of the routine for the first week until it becomes automatic. It might be much longer than the first week. Praise each group of students who transition smoothly to encourage that consistency.
Something to think about is that some transitions might seem obvious to us as teachers, like moving from independent work to group work. But students won't know your expectation unless you explicitly show them. So we want to break those routines into small, clear steps and demonstrate each one. Visual reminders, posted directions, labeled areas for materials, these can all help students remember the routine. And like Tammy was referring, you know, how long it takes your students to get a routine is going to depend on age and maturity. So now we're going to talk about classroom behavior because classroom behavior can feel challenging, especially for new teachers, but really all of us. And that's completely normal. Classrooms are dynamic environments with many personalities, needs, emotions interacting at the same time. One of the most helpful ways to think about behavior is that behavior is communication. Students may be showing frustration because the task is difficult. They might be expressing boredom or confusion or seeking attention and connection. The way we respond makes all the difference. The first step isn't just giving a reward or jumping to a quick fix. It's responding with curiosity and clarity. Ask yourself, what is this behavior trying to tell me? Before we even get to responding to the behaviors, it's important to remember that the foundation of a smooth classroom is strong culture, routines, and clear expectations. Students feel much more confident and secure when they know what is expected of them. Predictable routines like entering the classroom, turning in assignments, or transitioning between activities, these reduce uncertainty and prevent many off-task behaviors before they even start. Empathy also plays a really big role. Students bring experiences and circumstances into the classroom that we may not always see. Sometimes a student may need individual support, and other times a behavior challenge may signal a need to reflect on our own routines or instruction. So when behavior comes up, we want to avoid the instinct to immediately fix the situation just to ease discomfort. Long-term success comes from connection, consistency, and clarity, not quick solutions. So when behavior arises, pause and ask, what is the student communicating? How can I respond with empathy, clarity, and structure?
Building on that, strong expectations and routines are one of the most effective ways to prevent behavior challenges in the first place. When students understand what's expected and know how the classroom operates, there's far less room for confusion. That's why proactive teaching, the modeling, practicing, and reinforcing routines, is so powerful. But even with strong systems in place, behaviors will still come up. That's just part of working with students. What matters most in those moments is how we respond. Students benefit from responses that are clear, calm, and consistent. Consistency helps them understand that expectations apply everywhere, every day, not just when the teacher happens to notice.
It can also be helpful to think about behavior as a part of the learning process. So just like academic skills, behavioral skills develop over time. Students experience a range of emotions, but they don't always have the skills yet to manage them effectively. So when challenges arise, students may need reminders, they may need structured opportunities to reflect, or support in repairing mistakes and trying again. When responses are predictable and fair, students begin to trust the classroom environment. That sense of trust is essential for building a positive and productive culture.
Absolutely is. There's also an important shift in how we think about time. It can sometimes feel like addressing behavior takes away from instruction, but in reality, it's part of the learning. When we pause to reteach a routine or model a behavior or support a student in managing emotions, we're helping build the skills they need to engage more successfully moving forward. That investment pays off in stronger learning over time. Let's look at a quick example. Imagine a student repeatedly talks while others are speaking during a class discussion. Instead of immediately viewing that as defiance, we might pause and ask, does the student understand the expectation for discussion? Have we clearly taught and practiced the routine for listening and responding? Or does the student need support with a skill like self-regulation or active listening? When we approach behavior with those questions in mind, our responses become much more instructional and less reactive.
But this kind of reflection also helps us grow as teachers. So sometimes behavior points us back to something we can strengthen, like reteaching a routine, modeling expectations more clearly, or providing additional support for a skill. When we combine that reflection with empathy and consistency, we create a classroom where students feel understood, supported, and capable of success. Think about a behavior or situation you might have experienced or one you anticipate might happen in your classroom. Ask yourself, what expectation is connected to this situation? What routine might help prevent it? What skill might the student need more support with? So this kind of reflection helps you move from reacting in the moment to planning proactively. So we'll walk through one example together. So think about the scenario of during independent work, a student repeatedly talks to neighbors instead of focusing, which this is going to happen. It happens all the time. What expectation is connected? So students are expected to work independently and stay focused. What routine might help? A clearly taught independent work routine, how to get started, where to work, and how to ask for help appropriately. And then what skill might be missing? So self-regulation and staying on task. The student may need more modeling, they may need reminders, or even possibly visual supports. So how this helps, by thinking through this in advance, you can plan supports like modeling, expectations, practicing routines, or checking in with the student before work time even begins. When we approach behavior with curiosity, clarity, and consistency, and connect it back to the expectations, routines, and skills, we create a classroom where students really feel supported, understood, and ready to learn.
As we wrap up today's session, let's bring back the key ideas together. Expectations tell students what matters in your classroom. Routines show students how everyday learning works. Consistent responses to behavior help students understand how to grow and improve with that structure. When those pieces work together, classroom culture becomes much more stable and supportive for everyone involved. In your working document, you'll find activities that invite you to draft your core classroom expectations, design or refine important routines, and reflect on how you respond to behavior with clarity and consistency. These are the building blocks that help transform your values into daily classroom practice.
You don't need to have every routine perfectly designed right away. Teaching is a process of learning, adjusting, and refining over time. What matters most is that you're approaching your classroom with intentionality and practicing reflection. In our next session, Teach, we'll take the next step and explore instructional strategies that help bring all of these elements together so your classroom becomes a place where a strong culture and meaningful learning go hand in hand. Thank you for being here and for the care you're putting into your development as an educator. We'll see you next session.